Welcome to the last part of the Baby Yoda modeling session, the return of the Baby Jedi. For the new viewers here, this video is part of a series called How to Make a Baby Yoda in Blender. If you guys want to find out how we created the base mesh and how we sculpted the bust, feel free to go to the first two videos prior to this one. But if you want to learn how to play texture and render, then feel free to continue and watch. From our previous session, we were able to sculpt the Baby Yoda bust, and I went ahead to create our color map, as well as the normal map and the roughness map. I painted the skin using the texture paint editor as well as Photoshop in creating the normal map. Via texture paint, I'm now projecting each maps in our bust so you guys can see the UV wrap texture as translated into 3D. This is our color map. And this is our normal map. The roughness and specular map was initially created in Photoshop, but I modified it and enhanced it in Blender via the texture paint too. So this one's the roughness map. You can use the paint tool in texture paint to edit. This one's supposed to be the specular map, but I ended up not using this one. I instead used the parameters in our material. In the shading UI, I went ahead and assigned the texture nodes in the parameters of our main material. I used an add-on called Node Wrangling for a quick view of each maps. And then I played around with different options. So again, this isn't exact science, and I recommend you guys to play along with the parameters provided in the materials node. I used the reddish subsurface to simulate the blood vessel underneath the skin. This is common in texturing humans and living organisms. All of this is rendered via the EV, real-time rendering engine, which makes the pipeline very fast. Blender only used to have the cycles, which is quite slow but realistic. If you take a look at this one's much better, but this rendered twice the time as EV in my computer. And as you can see, I used an HDRI map to make that realistic lighting. You may download HDRI from websites such as HDRI Haven and other websites. And then I went ahead and added the base scarf to save some rendering compute time. This is intentionally placed to hide the neck and the body part of our little Jedi hero. I'll now recreate this clothing. Initially created it from a torus So switching back to layout editor, I created a torus, and then with combination of edge pull, vertex grabbing, and pulling as well as rotational transformation, I was able to create a clothing texture. If you want, you may go to the sculpting UI and do the sculpting after doing the subdivision or the smoothing. It really depends on your pipeline. In my case, I made it a quick and dirty approach. So I just simply pull the vertices to indicate the clothing texture. I then cut the edge section to simulate the corner of a scarp. Again, I played around with the move, rotate, scale tools until I satisfied the simulation. By simulated cloth, I mean the modeling per se. Because later on, I'll provide you another approach, which is the real simulation in Blender. But for now, let's take a look at how I did with the corners of the scarp. I'll fast forward the video up to the moment that I'm satisfied with the modeling of the scarf. So I then place the scarf in our little Jedi. Let's try it. And then I assign the same cloth material. That's a great thing about Blender. All of the materials are saved and you could just simply assign it to new objects. So I've added subdivision and shade smooth and then rendered this in cycle. Let's model the lower clothing of Baby Yoda. To achieve this realistic clothing model, I made use of Blender physics engine. I created a plane, placed it above a rigid body, in this case, a cylinder, and applied collision for both objects. To run the simulation, simply press spacebar. Do multiple tests, playing around with the collision option, as well as the weight and other parameters as needed. It's a good practice to check Blender's documentation whenever you encounter problems like this. In my case, the collision was not working due to the cylinder not having the collision's physics parameter turned on. Let's try it one more time. There you go. So we may now freeze this version of the plane and have it sculpted like any other objects. I've also added few hair particles on top of Baby Yoda's head. This was achieved with assigning a vertex group as a target for the hair particle. I won't go in depth with the particle physics, but you may check numerous tutorials on YouTube to learn more on this powerful tool. We are now ready to add the lightsaber. To do this, simply create a long cylinder with materials set to emission. Change the color of the base material and modify the illumination parameter. Remember, set to emission. Let's play around with the illumination. This looks perfect. Now let's set up the camera. The camera is constrained to focus on the Yoda's bust. We do this via the constraint and follow options. We then place the camera on an empty cube as a parent. So this makes sure that whenever we move the empty cube, the camera will follow through. We then constrained the cube to move in a Bezier circle. To add Bezier circle, go to Add. It's underneath Curve. Curve and Circle. We then move the box around the circle using the parameter and the constraint. You may add keyframes whenever you move the camera. To achieve a realistic animation, we have to make sure that a character is properly animated. In our case, since we did not use any rigging, we may go on and proceed with shape keys via the object data property. We achieve this by selecting a shape key, setting the value to 1, and by pressing the keyframe icon whenever change the parameter. Make sure to edit the vertices in edit mode. And we do this with the regular grab tool with proportional editing via the command G. So in this part, I like to make a very slight animation. It would be nice to make Yoda blink a bit. So So I'll be moving that part. And then I'd like to make him smile. Mischievous smile. Now we have this slight motion, which can be our animation as the camera moves along that circle. To achieve a better animation, you may combine shape key with transformation animation. But in our case, it's just going to be a shape key. Since it's going to be a simple animation within the face. And we didn't add the rigging for the body or any part of the character's head. And that's mainly it for the animation part. So finally, we do the rendering via the command key F12. I recommend to use the HDRI maps to make sure that the render is more realistic. Again, you may download it via HDRI Haven or you may choose other websites. There are countless websites providing free resources for 3D, especially with Blender. This one's rendered via UV, which is much faster and at a very good quality. We may now check the animation by pressing the camera icon. We are now viewing it within the camera. And we are done. I really appreciate you guys sticking with me in this 4 parts video. This is my very first playlist in sharing my knowledge in Blender. I've so far used the tool for more than a week now, and I simply want to share what I've learned so far in this journey. Again, remember to click subscribe, like, and share, and I do hope this helps you a lot in your learning. Thank you for watching.